18.
18 years old.
Yes, Your Honor.
With 2 children.
Yes, Your Honor.
So you claim the defendant was cheating with her ex at the time her daughter was conceived. He's afraid to grow up.
Yes, Your Honor.
The other potential father has been tested for paternity.
I think he got enough nerve to sue me for $60 for a stroller. I've spent way more than that, over $5,000.
At 18 years old, and that's take care of her and her first child.
Gifts are not revocable. Once you give a gift, you can't take it back.
To me, that she had kissed Mr. Boatwright.
But I heard that I was 4 weeks pregnant, not no week and a half. Then why didn't he sign the birth certificate? Why was he there the whole pregnancy?
This description centers around a paternity dispute presented before Judge Lauren Lake, where the individuals involved arrive with emotional histories, tangled relationships, financial stress, and unresolved personal pain. The courtroom environment is formal yet human, structured by law yet shaped by the unpredictable emotions of the people who stand to speak. The central tension is whether a DNA test will confirm or deny biological paternity, and how that answer will affect custody, child support, and the psychological stability of the child involved. This is a place where the truth changes everything. The petitioner is a young man who has brought the case forward, not because of the monetary value of a stroller or any one specific expense, but because of the growing uncertainty surrounding his role in a child's life. The stroller refund is simply a symbolic entry point into a larger emotional conflict. The stroller represents commitment, expectation, trust, and emotional investment. When a DNA test becomes the focal point, it reflects how people regret taking such tests only after they have already emotionally committed. The courtroom is where emotional commitment and biological certainty collide. Judge Lauren Lake presides with her characteristic balance of empathy, clarity, and firmness. She embodies the relationship between law and justice, demonstrating how legal obligations exist, but justice requires understanding the emotional stories behind those obligations. She listens to both parties. The young father who claims he has doubts, and the young mother who insists that the child belongs to him. Both are young, both have made mistakes. Both carry the weight of decisions made too early, too fast. In this courtroom, age is not an excuse. Maturity becomes mandatory. There are witnesses relevant to the case, including a second potential father who has already been tested. His presence in the courthouse underscores the seriousness of the matter. The courtroom discussions revolve around fidelity, trust, the interpretation of timelines, the belief in what constitutes evidence, and the deep psychological need to belong. As the discussion continues, the conversation touches on how adverse inference in Evidence Act principles apply. When someone acts in a way that suggests guilt or uncertainty, the court weighs that behavior in evaluating credibility. The young father expresses that at the time the child was conceived, the mother had contact with her previous partner. The mother denies cheating. The second potential father acknowledges a kiss, but denies anything more. Judge Lauren Lake focuses not only on the facts, but also on the emotional implications of parenting at a young age. She highlights how the concept of justice in jurisprudence is not merely about determining who is factual father, but about determining accountability, responsibility, stability, and future well-being for the child. The mother describes the daily struggle, providing food, clothing, care, and emotional support for the baby. She is kept up with childcare expenses and daily needs. The father expresses that he has sacrificed, moved locations, changed living situations, and attempted to be present. Both parties feel exhausted. Both feel hurt. Each believes their version of events is justified. The courtroom environment does not allow emotional chaos. It demands structured explanation and concrete clarity. Judge Lauren Lake points out an important legal principle. Gifts are not revocable. The stroller cannot be refunded because it was given willingly. This immediately dismisses the financial reimbursement claim. However, the core of the case remains. The request for the DNA test. The courtroom becomes a place where the emotional wounds rise to the surface. Each statement reveals deeper pain. The young father feels betrayal and uncertainty. The young mother feels abandoned and overwhelmed. The second potential father feels defensive and misunderstood. This case has psychological echoes you find discussed in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals describe rebuilding their lives after emotional trauma, betrayal, or youthful mistakes. The conflict also resembles conversations heard in the Divorce Course podcast, where relationship breakdowns expose how communication collapses before love does. The testimony in this courtroom reflects stories frequently heard on the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where legal professionals discuss how law must interact with human behavior, moral responsibility, and emotional consequences. The narrator in this description highlights how the truth changes everything. Once DNA enters the discussion, it becomes a scientific measurement of biological identity, unaffected by love, intention, promises, or emotional history. Many DNA test cheating stories share this theme. What is believed does not always match what is true. Judge Lauren Lake addresses each party directly, reinforcing the responsibility to communicate clearly, to act with maturity regardless of age, and to respect the emotional well-being of the child at the center. She reminds them that the child will one day grow old enough to understand and ask questions. In this courtroom, decisions are made not only for today, but for the story that child will one day hear. The courtroom pauses for the DNA results. There is suspense, tension, and emotional pressure. The biological determination affects legal responsibility, child support, and parental identity. The young father experiences profound emotional release when it is revealed that he is indeed the biological father. His internal struggle dissolves into relief. The young mother feels validated, heard, and supported by the court. The second potential father is freed from accusation, but remains invested in his own responsibilities with his own child. The judge orders the father to pay child support, specifically half of the expenses already incurred, totaling $2,535. This ruling reflects the Supreme Court child support standards, where financial responsibility is shared between biological parents to ensure the welfare of the child. The judge explains that fatherhood requires emotional stability and consistent presence, not occasional gestures. The courtroom concludes with accountability, relief, and a renewed possibility of co-parenting. The description emphasizes how cases like this also remind society that adoption stories full episodes. Divorce cases and legal disputes are not merely legal dramas, but deeply human stories where identity, belonging, trust, and responsibility intersect. This was not a scene. This was a lesson in adulthood, accountability, and the profound weight of the truth. The emotional atmosphere of the courtroom shifts after the DNA results are revealed. There is relief, but also a quiet realization that the journey does not end when the truth is spoken. In many situations involving paternity and responsibility, the truth changes everything, but it does not automatically fix everything. Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes that the confirmation of biological fatherhood comes with a lifelong obligation, one that extends far beyond the financial calculation of child support. The father now stands in a position where his identity and responsibilities are no longer uncertain. The question becomes not whether he is the father, but what kind of father he is willing to be. The mother listens with tearful acknowledgement. She expresses that all she ever wanted was stability for her child, someone who would not walk away when things were difficult. Her voice reflects the exhaustion of single parenting, the weight of nights spent awake thinking about diapers, formula, rent, doctor appointments, and emotional presence. She has carried both the physical and emotional burden of parenting, and now she seeks shared responsibility. The ruling from Judge Lauren Lake confirms her right to that stability. The courtroom discussions now transition to the larger understanding of what the relationship between law and justice truly means. Law provides structure, statutes, obligations, financial calculations, proof procedures. Justice, however, acknowledges how emotional experiences shape responsibility. The mother did not come to court merely to win financial support. She came to court for recognition, confirmation, and closure. the father did not come merely to argue over a stroller. He came to resolve the silent fear that had been unsettling him since the early stages of pregnancy. The second potential father came to protect his reputation and to show maturity by acknowledging mistakes and lessons learned. The case itself becomes a living example of the concept of justice in jurisprudence, where fairness must be measured not only by evidence but also by the emotional lives affected. Judge Lauren Lake guides the discussion with empathy. She has seen cases like these countless times, but never treats them as routine. Each case is unique because each child is unique. The judge's presence reflects the same heart found in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals speak openly about their struggles, their failures, and their growth. The court, in this moment, becomes a space of healing, not through denial or escape, but through confrontation and clarity. Discussions shift toward the future. Co-parenting is emphasized as not only a legal requirement, but a social and emotional commitment. Judge Lauren Lake stresses that co-parenting requires communication, patience, consistency, and maturity. It is not enough to be present when convenient. Parenting demands sacrifice, adaptation, and humility. The father must rebuild trust with the mother and establish emotional connection with the child. The mother must create space for the father to participate without allowing past frustrations to become barriers. References to the Divorce Course podcast become relevant here, as co-parenting after emotional conflict requires the ability to separate one's feelings about the partner from the responsibility towards the child. Judge Lake reminds them that parenting is not about whether the adults like or dislike each other. It is about ensuring the child grows up with emotional stability. She speaks on how too many children grow up living with the emotional consequences of their parents' unresolved conflicts. The courtroom is a space where the adults are required to face themselves, not only their partners. There is reflection on how DNA test people regret taking when they expect emotional confirmation and receive painful truth instead. But in this case, the test restored a missing piece. The father, now confirmed, expresses how his uncertainty had been creating emotional distance. He did not want to commit his entire life and heart to a child who might not be his. But his love had been real. The results did not create emotion. They simply validated what was already growing. It becomes clear that his regret was never in loving the child, but in fearing the possibility of loving and losing. Judge Lauren Lake reminds both parties that regret should now be replaced with responsibility. This is where the legal process reinforces emotional structure. The judge calculates the expenses not merely as reimbursement, but as a demonstration that raising a child requires real and measurable investment. The sum awarded reflects what is fair, aligning with Supreme Court child support principles, where both parents are obligated to contribute to the financial upbringing of the child. The emphasis is that support is not about punishing one parent. It is about ensuring the child's needs are met. The mother's struggle is acknowledged. The father's doubt is acknowledged. The second man's exit is acknowledged, and the child's importance is centered above everything. The courtroom becomes a place of collective admission, not of guilt, but of humanity. Everyone involved had been carrying emotional weight. Fear, resentment, confusion, pressure. The ruling allows them to set it down and begin again. There is then reflection on how these situations appear in the Game Changing Attorney podcast, where legal professionals discuss how emotional intelligence and relational understanding are as essential to law as legal codes. The judge does not simply rule. She teaches, guides, and reframes perspective. This is more than a case. This is emotional restructuring. The story continues as the judge urges both parents to emphasize communication going forward. Co-parenting agreements require intentional discussions, scheduled responsibilities, and consistency. The father is encouraged to remain present not only financially, but emotionally, in ways that are stable, predictable, and kind. The mother is encouraged to allow healing in the relationship between father and child, to encourage healthy bonding rather than revisiting past grievances. There is also acknowledgement of how adoption stories' full episodes sometimes arise when fathers disappear and others step in. But here, Now that the biological father is confirmed, the expectation is not replacement, but restoration. A biological bond must now be strengthened into an emotional one. The truth has done its work. Relationships will never be exactly as they were before this day, but they are now grounded in reality. That reality is the foundation for building a stable future. This description highlights the emotional weight of family truth, the legal obligations of parenthood, the moral expectations of maturity, and the deeply human desire for belonging. Judge Lauren Lake has transformed the courtroom into a place where emotional wounds are acknowledged, responsibility is reinforced, and a child's future is prioritized with clarity. As the courtroom moves toward closure, something shifts on a deeper emotional level. The realization settles that the DNA result did more than provide biological clarity. It redefined identities. The father is not simply a young man caught between doubt and hope anymore. He is now recognized as a provider, a protector, and a permanent influence in his child's life. The mother, likewise, is not merely a person defending her integrity. She becomes seen as a figure of resilience, one who has carried responsibilities far heavier than her age suggests. Judge Lauren Lake's tone conveys that the hardest work lies not in the courtroom decision, but in what happens after they walk out of the doors. The courtroom environment represents a crossroads. There are only two paths: repeat old patterns, or begin a new chapter grounded in accountability and emotional presence. The judge's words remind them that the relationship between law and justice requires active participation. Justice is not automatic. Justice requires two parents who commit to doing what is right, even when it is difficult. It requires acknowledging that the past happened and cannot be undone, but the future is still open and must be shaped with care. The young father recognizes how his uncertainty created distance, and this acknowledgement becomes a step toward emotional maturity. His doubt once served as a barrier, a form of self-protection. Now that the truth has been confirmed, that barrier must come down. This transition mirrors the themes often spoken about in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals describe letting go of fear and beginning to accept accountability. The father is learning that fatherhood is not defined solely by biology. It is defined by presence, stability, consistency, and choices repeated every day. The courtroom is only the beginning of this transformation. Meanwhile, the mother reflects on how isolation shaped her experience of parenting. Carrying the emotional and physical responsibilities alone was overwhelming. Her voice reveals exhaustion that runs deeper than sleepless nights. It reflects the emotional loneliness of parenting without reassurance. Now, with the ruling in place, she can finally exhale. She understands that financial support is not just about money, it is about acknowledgement. It is about recognizing that parenting is not meant to be a solitary task. Her relief also holds caution. Trust must be rebuilt, not assumed. The emotional repairs between both parents will require time, honesty, and patience. Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes that the concept of justice in jurisprudence must always center the child. No matter what disagreements have existed between the adults, the child must never become a symbol of conflict. The child must never grow up hearing stories of blame, resentment, or disputed identity. The child deserves to grow up knowing love from both sides. This is the moral foundation the judge insists upon. The second potential father leaves the courtroom with clarity. His presence in the case was tied to the uncertainty that once existed. The DNA test removed that uncertainty. His role now is to continue to grow as a father to the child who is biologically his and to remain grounded in accountability. His experience demonstrates a lesson central to many DNA test cheating stories. Mistaken assumptions can create emotional harm, but clarity can also create space for healing. His journey is a reminder that truth, once accepted, becomes the foundation for personal responsibility. The financial ruling of $2,535 symbolizes more than reimbursement. It represents measurable acknowledgement of responsibility. It aligns with legal principles similar to those seen in Supreme Court child support rulings. It is a recognition of shared responsibility for the child's needs. From this point forward, both parents are expected to contribute, not only financially, but emotionally and structurally. The court has ensured that the financial burden is not placed solely on one parent. Justice, in this case, is balanced, not punitive. This case illustrates the emotional and social complexity found in stories discussed on the Divorce Course podcast, where the end of romantic love forces individuals to redefine how they interact. Parenting after romantic separation requires emotional restraint. It requires the ability to speak respectfully even when frustrated. Judge Lauren Lake is clear. The well-being of the child depends on the behavior of the parents toward one another. The court can enforce child support, but it cannot enforce kindness, patience, or emotional maturity. Those are choices, renewed every day. There is also a psychological layer relating to adverse inference in Evidence Act principles. When actions suggest withholding information, trust is damaged. In this case, emotional fear and miscommunication contributed to suspicion. Now, clarity allows a reset. But trust will only return if both parents choose consistent transparency moving forward. The law can identify biological truth, but trust can only be rebuilt through continued action. The larger themes in this case mirror those discussed in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where legal professionals reflect on the emotional dynamics of litigation. The courtroom is not just a place to argue facts. It is a place where human vulnerability is exposed. Judge Lauren Lake understands this well and addresses not only the legal facts, but the emotional implications. Her guidance reinforces that emotional maturity is not optional in co-parenting. It is essential. As the case nears its conclusion, the emotional tone becomes reflective rather than tense. The father begins to understand that this is the moment where his role shifts from uncertainty to responsibility. The mother begins to feel the weight of parenting lighten, not because her responsibilities disappear, but because she no longer carries them alone. The child, although unaware of the events unfolding in the courtroom, gains something invaluable, a foundation for stability. The truth revealed by the DNA test does not erase the past. It does not undo arguments, tears, doubts, or fears, but it provides a new starting point. The judge's reminder that truth changes everything continues to echo in the atmosphere. This truth allows healing to begin. Healing will not happen instantly. It will require commitment, just as parenting does. The courtroom becomes quiet at the end, not because there is nothing left to say, but because what needed to be said has been acknowledged. There is no triumph or defeat. There is only clarity. And clarity, in cases like these, is its own form of peace. The father leaves understanding that presence is not occasional. It must be consistent. The mother leaves knowing she is supported and seen. The second father leaves with freedom from uncertainty. Judge Lauren Lake remains steady, as always, guiding the courtroom into closure, with the certainty that justice is not only a rule, it is a practice. In the end, this case reflects something universal. Families are not defined by perfection or flawless history. They are defined by their willingness to grow, to tell the truth, to accept responsibility, and to choose the child's well-being above personal resentment. The courtroom did not simply determine biology, It opened a path for emotional and relational restoration. This is what happens when the truth arrives. It rearranges everything, but it also allows something new to begin.